So it's been 1 year since I made part 1 of this video. Why did it take so long to make part 2? I don't really know. So yeah, since I have time before I need to go back to another project that I'm working on, I'm going to finally close this two-parter by basically finishing off the final years of the war. So no more intro, let's go. It was the winter of 1862. General Ambrose Burnside was beginning his first invasion into Virginia, and also his only invasion into Virginia, after the mixed results that came out of the former General McClellan. But it wasn't like Burnside was any better. The Battle of Fredericksburg started over the Rappahannock River, but eventually the Unionists came in and took the city. But it wasn't over yet. You see, the Confederates had backed up to Marye's Heights, where the Confederates had pushed back the Unionists, forcing the Unionists to withdraw again. They attacked the Unionists again at Chancellorsville and still won, but they did lose Stonewall Jackson, a notable Confederate general, via accidental gunfire. Way to go, geniuses! Once again, the Unionists crossed over the Potomac, and the Confederates took their turn and invaded the North, hoping to surround the District of Columbia, because their last invasion worked so well. And in the summer of 1863, the Confederates invaded the North. In the meantime, though the Unionists had been doing less than spectacular against the Confederates, the Unionists had made extra steps to discredit the Confederates. Throughout the entire war, the threat of international intervention had been a threat the Unionists had to keep in mind. With Operation Anaconda blockading the Confederates' cotton, it brought the ever-present threat of war with the Europeans. So Lincoln pulled out something that he had been working on for his entire term: the Emancipation Proclamation and the abolishment of slavery in the northern states. The results were mixed, but the country didn't break up any further, so it was a win for Lincoln. Anyway, on July 1st, the Confederates had begun their invasion into Pennsylvania, where they came across Union soldiers in Gettysburg, and so began the Battle of Gettysburg, the brutalest battle in the American Civil War. The battle was split into 3 days. On July 1st, Gettysburg was under Union hands, with Confederates pushing in from the north and west, pushing them to Cemetery Hill on July 2nd. Lee and Longstreet were on the west, Ewell on the east, and General Meade of the Union in the middle. And finally, on July 3rd, the Unionists continued to stand their ground around Cemetery Hill, and hoping to break through the line, one Captain Pickett led Pickett's Charge, one of the most famous offensives in the American Civil War, and after a few skirmishes, it was over. Out of the 600 casualties in the Civil War, more than 1/12 of those casualties died at Gettysburg. But this bloodbath did prove one thing to everyone who witnessed it: the Confederates had reached its limit. On the day Lee retreated from Gettysburg, another victory had taken place in the West. Vicksburg had finally fallen to the Union, with the Mississippi finally under Union control. This had essentially split the Confederacy in two, and General Kirby Smith would later notify President Jefferson Davis of the Confederacy that Texas would no longer help in the conflict. All this couldn't be done without the help of one General Ulysses S. Grant, who, unlike many of his eastern counterparts, was willing to use all the soldiers to win battles. This made him very controversial, but he didn't care. He was too drunk to notice. Grant would later be sent eastward to aid in the Overland Campaign, but we'll get to that later, because we now have to talk about another famous general, General Sherman, who would later become the architect of late 19th century warfare before World War I. Even with the success at Gettysburg and Vicksburg, Lincoln knew that it was going to be an uphill battle to be re-elected for a second term. Meanwhile, General Sherman had begun to make his way to Atlanta and thereby make his way to the sea. So after spending months under scorched earth tactics, Sherman reached Atlanta by July of 1864. Not only was this the Union's chance to cut off the rail and supply hub of the Confederacy, but could also just be the morale boost that Lincoln was looking for, to be re-elected. But then it went under siege. The siege would break in September, just weeks before Election Day, and the morale Lincoln needed was there, as Atlanta began to fall to Union hands. Thereafter, Sherman's men marched to the sea, and began to move up the coast, where they burned the city of Columbia in South Carolina, the birthplace of secession, before continuing their invasion northward. At the same time, General Grant began his overland campaign, the Union's third attempt at an invasion of Richmond. But with Grant at the helm, everyone knew this invasion was going to be different. Slowly but surely, Grant got closer and closer to Richmond. Once he made it to the James River, he made a detour to Petersburg in order to remove the Richmond's Southern Railroad junction, essentially isolating Richmond from the rest of the Confederacy. So in June of 1864, the final showdown commenced, with the best generals of both sides participating. But it only proved to be a bit anticlimactic with another siege. There were offensives here and there, but it wouldn't be until April 2nd, 1865, when Petersburg fell to the Union. Now you would think this final invasion to capstone the war of ethics and bloodshed would be a glorious moment for the Unionist soldiers. And I mean, it was. But there was one problem. When the Confederates deserted the city, including Jefferson Davis, in order for the Unionists to not follow them, they had Confederate soldiers burn the former capital. So when the Unionists took over, their first priority was putting out the fire. Grant would later meet Lee at the Appomattox courthouse 1 week later. Lee would surrender, but he would not be tried for treason, and the American Civil War officially came to an end. But the blood continued to be spilt. 5 days later, Abraham Lincoln would be assassinated by John Wilkes Booth in Ford's Theater, but it was only the beginning. In May, Alabama and Mississippi surrendered to the Union. Jefferson Davis would be captured on May 10, 1865, and on June 23rd, the last Confederate general surrendered, finally bringing an end to the insurrection. The American Civil War proved to be a tragic event in the history of America. With a death count of 500,000 people, it proved to be one of America's brutalest conflicts to date. There are countless books, movies, and monuments about these 4 years of rebellion, showing the conflicts in various ways. And afterwards, a lot had changed. Slavery had been abolished, the government had shown its dominance over the states, and the United States had proved to be more of a republic than a democracy. But even though it was an inflection point, there was still some remnants of America's early problems that still lingered afterwards. For example, even with the 13th and 15th Amendments that were set in place, and the South being put under Reconstruction, with Lincoln dead and the Republicans not really caring as much, racism continued in the country. And even though tension died down between the Republicans and Democrats, it would only be a matter of time before something happened. But nah, it's not like anything has happened so far. I don't see any consequences coming from those two things. Nope. This is fine. This is fine. Nothing has happened so far. Not like anything has happened in like the past 2 years or anything. Nope, America's fine. This country is just totally fine. Like, you're saying it has problems. Like, what are you talking about? Ha 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 ha.